tutor for biology. Today I'll be covering digestion and absorption. Briefly, I will run through how to access revision notes and test in clay6.com. Now open the page clay6.com, click on practice. You will find a lot of packages. Select your package. Since we are doing NEET course here, I'm clicking on NEET Premium. And it has got series of tests in physics, chemistry, biology, chapter wise test and NEET full test. Now here you will be seeing a lot of bubbles and each colored bubble is a test. Now if you look at the green bubble, it means that you have completed the test, but you can revisit the test any times, any number of times you want. Suppose you have scored less, then you want to come back and take the test after learning all the concepts thoroughly, you can do it. And suppose you want to revise it, even if you have got good marks at the end, you want to see you do a revision, you can quickly do it. Blue bubble shows that the test has not been attempted yet and it is a reminder for you to take it. Yellow bubble indicates that you have not completed the test. Maybe you would have started the test, you would have felt after 4 or 5 questions that you are not really ready with the concepts. You want to learn the concept and take the test again. So you can continue the test from this uh, bubble which is showing that you have not completed the test. And red bubble is a randomized test. So once you complete all these tests, you can click on this and number for each test, it depends on the complexity of the chapter and how much process the textbook. So that is how these tests have been created. Now, I'm sure since you're all taking NEET, you will be thinking what kind of questions are we going to in the examination. In biology, especially after a analysis, we have found 30 on NCERT based. Approximately 68 to 70 questions in the examination are directly from NCERT books. They can be attempted easily those who read NCERT syllabus regularly. Direct from the previous year's question papers, another 8 to 10 question papers, you can easily solve these questions. These questions may appear either without any modification or with slight modification. The modified questions. At least 8 to 10 questions in NEET will be newer questions. These questions become the game changer for those as they can be solved by mere mugging up of facts. Though they are from NCERT book, to get them right, you need to apply the knowledge that you have about the subject. So in this website, an earnest attempt has been made by the tutors to help you prepare adequately for your NEET. I hope you have now got the framework. Now let us begin the lesson. Now here, if you click on this bubble, you will get revision notes. These revision notes are going to help you to make a quick revision in physics, chemistry, and biology. This has got just 135 pages, and it becomes very, very easy for you to learn and revise for your exams. All the key points have been captured for you by the tutors, so that it becomes very easy. And even if you have any doubt, you can always make a preparation. Now, let us begin the lesson. Okay, now let us begin the lesson. The use of nutrients by an organism for harvesting energy, building body substances for growth and development, and providing protection from diseases is called nutrition. The chemical substances that are present in the food, that which provides the nutrition, are called the nutrients. Now, nutriology is the science of nutrition, the study of food and their uses in diet and therapy. Dietetics is the study and regulation of the diet. Now, depending upon the mode of nutrition, organisms can be classified into autotrophs, heterotrophs, and symbionts. Now, let us look into each of these things. Now, it is the autotroph. So you know autotrophs are the organisms that prepare their own food. Sorry, autotrophs are the organisms that prepare their own food, and you know that autotrophic nutrition is seen in the plants. Now chemotrophs are the organisms that depend upon the inorganic substances and then utilize these inorganic substances to prepare their own food. Now you have already seen that photoautotrophs are and chemoorganisms use energy from the inorganic substances. Now let us look into heterotrophic nutrition. So heterotrophic nutrition can be broadly classified into holozoic nutrition, saprophytic nutrition, parasitic nutrition, and symbiotic nutrition. So nutrition involving engulfment of the whole or the part of plant or an animal, either in solid or in liquid state, is called animal holozoic nutrition. Now, if we look at saprophytic nutrition, a few animals do not ingest solid food. Instead, they secrete digestive enzymes directly onto their food, which are dead or decaying matter, and then suck the digested food outside the body. This kind of nutrition is called saprophytic or saprozoic nutrition. You know, parasitic nutrition, parasites thrive on liquid food material obtained from the body of the host, and their mode of nutrition is designated as parasitic nutrition. The host may or may not suffer by this relationship. And you have two kinds of parasites. One kind of parasite living outside the body of the host and drawing the nutrition and getting the shelter, as in louse on your hair, and they are called as exoparasites. Then you have the endoparasites, which are found inside the body of the host and drawing the nutrition like Plasmodium, Trypanosoma, Ascaris, and Taenia. Now, symbiotic nutrition, the situation in which two organisms or animals might live in association and derive nutrition from each other. This is the case with some symbionts whose nutrition is referred to as symbiotic nutrition, or it is also known as mutualism. For example, Escherichia coli that lives in the intestine of man synthesizes vitamin B12, which is used by man, and E. coli receives in turn simpler food from the intestine of the man. Now let us look at some types of holozoic nutrition. So these are the different types, and the list is a longer one, but I have just condensed it, keeping in view the questions that have been asked for the NEET exams. Herbivores, animals that feed on plant materials, example cow, horse, and rabbit. Carnivores, animals that feed mainly on animal flesh, example lion, tiger, and dog. Omnivores, animals that eat both plants and other animals like cockroach, rat, bears, crows, man, etc. Insectivores are the animals that feed on the insects like toads, lizards, and spiny anteaters. Frugivores are animals that feed on fruits, example, monkeys, birds, and bats. Sanguinivores are animals that feed on blood of vertebrates, example, female Anopheles mosquito, leeches, and vampire bats. Now, detritivores are the animals that feed on decaying organic matter, example, earthworm. Fluid feeders are the animals that feed on fluids from plants, example butterfly, and male mosquito, that is Anopheles mosquito, will feed on the fluids from the plants. So this is about the types of holozoic nutrition. Now let us look into the steps of holozoic nutrition. The 5 steps of holozoic nutrition are ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and egestion. So ingestion is the method of taking in of the food. Animals are variously adapted both internally and externally for ingestion of the specific type of food they take. Depending upon the gross size of the food, feeding in animals can be classified into microphagy and macrophagy. Now, digestion. It is the process of breaking down of complex food materials into small and simpler ones with the help of digestive enzymes. Now, absorption is the process by which the digested food is then absorbed within the cytoplasm of the cells or through the cell lining from the in the alimentary canal. These absorbed food molecules are then used for construction of their own molecules or body substances during assimilation, and as a result of which the protoplasm gets replaced in different cells depending upon the requirement of the cells. Now, egestion is the removal of the undigested food material or the waste from the body of the organism. You know, digestion is of two types. One is intracellular digestion and other is extracellular digestion. In intracellular digestion, the food materials occur within the cells and digestion occurs within the cells. And this type of digestion occurs in protozoans and sponges. In coelentrates, the digestion is largely intracellular. In extracellular digestion, digestion of the food material occurs outside the cells in a cavity. The digestive enzymes are secreted into the cavity where digestion of food takes place. And this type of digestion occurs in higher invertebrates and all vertebrates. Now, with this background, let me go to human digestive system. So, digestive system of man consists of alimentary canal or gut and some accessory digestive organs. So, the alimentary canal is a coiled muscular tube extending from the mouth to the anus. It is about 6 to 9 meters long and consists of many specialized sections. Arranged sequentially, these are mouth, oral cavity, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and anus. Some digestive accessory organs like salivary glands, pancreas, liver, and gallbladder are connected to the main system by a series of ducts. Now let us look into the mouth part. Here I am only projecting the dentition part here. The mouth is an opening and it is protected by upper and lower lips. It leads into the oral cavity that has two lateral walls, an anterior roof, a posterior roof, and a pair of jaws, the upper maxilla and the lower mandible. Now, human dentition is described as diffeodont, means there are two sets of teeth. One is the permanent teeth and other is the milk teeth. Then you will find it is also called heterodont due to the presence of different kinds of teeth with different kinds of functions like incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. Now, if you human, and it is also known as thecodont because the teeth are all embedded within the socket. Now, the dental formula of humans is represented by I2C1PM2M3, that is in each quadrant. If you look at it, this entire thing, the upper half will be in the maxilla, it will be divided into two quadrants. Similarly, in the mandible also, it will be divided into two quadrants. So, each quadrant you will be finding ICPM, that is incisors, premolars, PM, incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. 2 1 2 3, that will be the dental formula of man, and that will be divided by 2 for the upper jaw and 2 to the lower jaw, that will be equal to 32. Now the oral cavity also receives saliva through the ducts of the salivary glands. Now let us know something about the salivary glands, which is very important. A few questions have been asked here. There are three pairs of salivary glands: parotid, submaxillary, and sublingual. The oral cavity leads through the pharynx into tube-like esophagus, which runs downwards through the throat and the thorax. A structure called the epiglottis guards the opening of the trachea or the nasal passages. The esophagus now gets into the diaphragm. Before that, let us look into the salivary glands. Now, if you look at the salivary glands, there are three pairs of salivary glands: parotid gland, submandibular gland, and sublingual gland. Know the positions and note the positions here. Sublingual means below the tongue. Submandibular means it is below the lower jaw, near the lowering jaw, and parotid is in the roof. This is where it will be found, and this is the largest gland here. Parotids are paired glands in the cheek regions near the ears. The secretion passes via Stenson's duct, which opens opposite to the second molar teeth in the mouth cavity. Mumps is an infection of parotid glands caused by a virus. The submandibular glands are located towards the posterior end of the lower jaw. They open into the floor of the mouth cavity by Wharton's duct. Sublingual glands are the smallest of the salivary glands present at the anterior part of the mouth. Their secretions are discharged by a number of small ducts called ducts of Venus. So you need to remember the ducts here. That is a Stevenson's duct, it is the parotid gland. Wharton duct is the submandibular gland, and Rivinus duct is sublingual gland. Now let us look into the stomach part here. Now you find stomach is the large distensible C-shaped and sac-like structure which is located on the left side in the upper portion of the abdominal cavity, and this upper part is called as the fundus, and the middle part body is the middle part, and pylorus or the anterior part. The middle part is also known as cardiac portion, and this is known as the pyloric region, and pyloric region will open into the duodenum. In adults, the stomach usually holds a volume of up to 1 to 1.5 liters. Pylorus is guarded by a sphincter muscle and opens into the first section of the small intestine called duodenum. So this is about the stomach. Now let us look into the small intestine. Small intestine, if you look anatomically, it is made up of three parts. This part is called as the duodenum. This is known as the jejunum, the middle part, and the last part is called as the ileum. And here at the CK or KK it is called, you will find a blind structure, and that is called as the vermiform appendix. Sorry, here it is found. The vermiform appendix is found here in the large intestine. You can see very clearly here. This colon, the one is the ascending colon, which runs horizontally is the transverse colon, and which comes down is the sigmoid colon. And here at the large intestine, you can see a finger-like projection, and this is called as the vermiform appendix. Sometimes this can get inflamed, and since it's a vestigial organ, it will be easily removed and they can be removed from the body, and it is not going to cause any harm, and then it opens into the rectum. Now the next part is the liver. So the liver, if you look at the liver as the function, liver, it is the largest gland in the body, weighing about 1.5 kilos in an adult, lying immediately under the diaphragm and below the right lips. The liver consists of two lobes. The left lobe forms about 1/6 of the liver, whereas the right lobe makes up the remainder. The right lobe has got three parts. Each lobe is divided into numerous lobules. Small branches of the hepatic artery and portal vein run between them. Thus, each lobule is formed of columns of secreting liver cells, capillaries from the portal vein and hepatic artery, and the minute bile ducts. These capillaries lead to a vein in the center of the lobule. The veins from the lobules drain into bigger veins and finally form the hepatic veins leaving the liver. Similarly, the smaller bile ducts join together, finally leaving the liver in two main ducts, one from each lobe. Now, the important functions, because liver is the biggest chemical factory in the body, it produces bile which is stored in the gallbladder before entering the small intestine, where it emulsifies the fat. It detoxifies the blood by removing and metabolizing poisonous substances. Liver stores glucose as glycogen and breaks down glycogen to glucose between meals to maintain a constant glucose concentration in the blood. The nitrogenous waste products from the decomposition of amino acids from proteins are converted to urea in the liver. Liver destroys old red blood cells and converts hemoglobin to the breakdown products in bile. Liver makes the blood proteins. The various chemical reactions occurring in the liver produce heat, which helps to gather the heat from the muscles and other organs to maintain the constant body temperature. So liver is the main organ which is involved in maintaining homeothermy. Now this duct system is very important from examination point of view. They will ask you to identify the parts. So you have to learn which part is what by practicing. Now, gallbladder is the smallest and elongated muscular sac situated below the liver. Pancreas is an elongated gland that is situated near the junction of the stomach and the duodenum. Both the liver and pancreas act as exocrine and endocrine glands, whereas gallbladder acts as a storing organ. Now, this is about I have given you. Now let us look into briefly into the transverse section of the gut, or it is also known as the histology of the gut, because we are looking at the various tissues that is making up the section of the gut. The wall of the alimentary canal consists of four major regions of different cells beginning from its cavity or lumen. The innermost layer is the mucosa, which contains the secretory and absorptive cells. At the base of the mucosa are some smooth cells. Just outside the mucosa is the submucosa. It consists of soft connective tissue layer with blood and lymph vessels and nerve supply. External to the submucosa is the muscularis externa, which is formed of the circular inner layer and a longitudinal outer layer of smooth muscles. The outermost layer of the gut is a fibrous coat, and that is called the serosa. The mucosa is the innermost region, forming the mucous membrane, and it is lined by the simple columnar epithelium. Mucosa is produced into millions of finger-like projections called villi. These villi are supplied with a network of blood capillaries and also a network of lymph vessels, the largest of which is central lacteal. Besides, the cells that line the surface of the villi produce numerous microscopic bristle-like projections, and these bristle-like projections are called microvilli or brush border. These further increase an enormous surface area for absorption of the nutrients. On the surface of the mucosal epithelium are billions of single-cell mucous glands called mucous or goblet cells. These cells mainly secrete mucus that act as lubricant and protects the epithelial surface from excoriation and digestion. Many surface areas of the gastrointestinal tract are lined by invaginations of the epithelium into the submucosa. These pits of intestine are called crypts of Leberkun. These crypts contain specialized secretory cells. Besides, the stomach and upper duodenum contains many deep tubular glands. Now, this is how a small intestine section looks like. This is the villi, and then this is the lacteals. Villi will absorb the amino acids and carbohydrates, but lacteals will absorb the fatty acids and glycerol, the end product of digestion. And here you find they are richly surrounded by the capillaries, artery, crypts, and the vein. So these diagram is also very important. They might ask you to identify the parts. So please have a note, make a note of all these diagrams that are important from examination point of view. Now let us look into the mobility of the human gut. Now, if you look at the mobility of the human gut, that is, mobility means how the food really moves in the gut. That is what is meant by mobility of the human gut. And this is the crux of the lesson. So this is where a lot of terms will be coming in, a lot of enzymes will be there. You should be really prepared with all these things so that you are able to take it in a minute when you are writing your exams. The ability of the alimentary canal to contract is called mobility. For digestion, absorption, and subsequent dequification, the food has to be moved sequentially along the entire length of the alimentary canal. In each of these sections, the food is subjected to different kinds of actions, and let us look into the fate of each the food item as it is passing in different organs. The food is chewed in the oral cavity and mixed with saliva, which is a mixture of water and electrolytes derived from the blood plasma, mucus, and serous fluids. Saliva, amylase or ptyalin, and lysozyme all secreted by the salivary glands. After chewing, the food is formed in bolus by the action of the tongue. Bolus is then pushed inwards through the pharynx into esophagus, and this process is called swallowing or agglutination. Swallowing involves coordinated activity of tongue, soft palate, pharynx and esophagus. The tongue blocks the mouth, soft palate closes off the nose, and larynx raises so that epiglottis closes off the trachea. As pharynx is also a part of respiratory system, the openings of the nasal passage and trachea are closed off by reflex action during swallowing. However, the first buccal phase is voluntary. Food thus moves into the pharynx and passes downward into the esophagus. When food enters the esophagus, the rhythmic contractions of the gut wall, peristalsis begins. Peristalsis is produced by the involuntary contraction of circular muscles, which is preceded by a simultaneous contraction of the longitudinal muscle and relaxation of the circular muscle lining the gut. When a peristaltic wave reaches the end of the esophagus, the sphincter opens, allowing the passage of bolus to the stomach. The sphincter muscle guarding the junction of the esophagus and the stomach normally remains closed and does not allow any contents of the stomach to move back. Now, gastrointestinal secretions and digestions, let us look in. Digestion of food in human is an extracellular process with the aid of a group of enzymes, and these are called as the hydrolases released from the cells of the digestive system. The exocrine include salivary glands, the secretory cells in the stomach and intestinal epithelium, and secretory cells of the liver and pancreas. Exocrine secretion usually consists of aqueous mixture of substances like water, ion, mucus, and enzymes. Enzymatic hydrolysis is initiated in the oral cavity by the action of starch digesting enzyme, that is ptyalin or alpha amylase. This enzyme, secreted by the salivary glands, helps in the breakdown of starch first to dextrins, shorter polysaccharide, and then into disaccharide maltose. The mucus of saliva will moisten the food. It will also lubricate the food and makes it easier to swallow. And sometimes what happens if you're eating a dry bread or a chapati, if it is too dry, what happens, there will be no enough secretion of saliva and you will be finding it very difficult to swallow. At that point of time, these foods fail to trigger off the secretion of saliva. You will drink plenty of water and then gulp the food. Mucus of the saliva moistens and dissolves some of the food and lubricates the esophagus. Bicarbonate ions of the saliva will neutralize the acids in the food. The thiocyanate ions of saliva act as antimicrobial agent and prevent infection by the microbes that often enter along with the food. About 30% of starch is hydrolyzed in the mouth. Carbohydrate digestion continues in the bolus as it passes to the stomach. In the stomach, the food is exposed to the action of gastric juice. Gastric juice is now a mixture of hydrochloric acid, enzyme pepsinogen, and mucus. The mucus neck cells or the goblet cells present in the mucous epithelium of the stomach mainly secretes mucus. Mucus acts as a lubricant and protects the epithelial surface from excoriation by HCl and digestion by pepsin. Now, parietal cells or oxyntic cells in the gastric gland secretes hydrochloric acid and a substance known as intrinsic factor, which is needed for adequate absorption of vitamin B12. Hydrochloric acid inactivates salivary and prevents further breakdown of carbohydrate. Acid also kills microorganisms. It lowers the pH of the stomach between 1.5 and 2.5. That means it is making the stomach as cells, the chief cells in the gastric gland secrete pepsinogen. Both types of cells are a part of oxyntic cells of the stomach epithelium. The pyloric tubular glands of the stomach secrete mainly mucus, some the pepsinogen and hormone gastrin. Pepsinogen has no proteolytic activity because it is an inactive form, and in the presence of HCl, there is a conversion of inactive pepsinogen into active pepsin, which is a principal protease of the stomach, and this digests the proteins into peptides. It is inactivated when it again comes in contact with mucus. Bicarbonate ions reduce acidity near the cells lining the stomach. Partially digested broth of the food then leaves the stomach and through its pyloric end, and now it enters the duodenum. Now the food is called as the chyme. Most enzymatic digestion takes place in the small intestine. The duodenum is the first part of the small intestine. It receives digestive enzymes and bicarbonates from the pancreas and bile from the liver via gallbladder. Pancreas is an elongated gland that secretes both digestive enzymes and hormones that help in to regulate the levels of glucose in the blood. Now, pancreatic acinar cells, that's the exocrine part of the pancreas, produce pancreatic juice that contains protein digesting enzymes, namely trypsin, chymotrypsin, carboxypeptidase, and carbohydrases like pancreatic alpha amylase and lipase. All these enzymes enter the duodenum via the pancreatic duct. Trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxypeptidases are secreted in their inactive forms as trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, and procarboxypolypeptidase, respectively. Trypsinogen is activated by enterokinase, secreted in the intestinal mucosa, whereas chymotrypsinogen and procarboxypolypeptidase are activated by trypsin. Pancreatic juice also contains bicarbonate and water. Bicarbonates neutralizes hydrochloric acid of the chyme that enters the duodenum. Bile, the main exocrine secretion of the liver, is initially concentrated and stored in the gallbladder. One thing you have to remember about bile is bile juice does not contain any enzymes. That is very, very important. On stimulation, bile is squeezed into duodenum through the cystic and common bile duct. Bile is a watery greenish fluid mixture containing bile salts, bile pigments, cholesterol, and lecithin. Bile salts play a very important role in the digestion of fats. As the fats are insoluble in water, they enter the intestine as drops within the watery chyme. Bile salts, which are partly lipid soluble and partly water soluble, emulsify the fat particles, and as a result, fat drops acquire a greater surface area. The enzyme lipase then acts upon fat drops and allows its digestion into glycerol and fatty acids. Bile pigments are the products of blood that are excreted in the bile. The two important bile pigments are bilirubin and biliverdin. Liver, along with feces, later excretes these substances excess of cholesterol. In response to the action of stimuli, visit from the vagus nerve, that is the 10th cranial nerve, and secretin. It is a gastrointestinal hormone. The Brunner's glands secretes a large amount of viscous enzyme, free, alkaline, and watery mucoid fluid. This secretion enables the duodenum to withstand the acidic chyme entering from the stomach until it is neutralized by the alkaline pancreatic and biliary secretions. Mucus is secreted by goblet cells, whereas water and electrolytes are secreted by the enterocytes present on the intestinal crypts. The mucus protects the duodenal wall from getting digested. The excess of bicarbonate ions present in the secretion of Brunner's glands combines with the bicarbonate ions of the pancreatic juice and forms the intestinal juice or the succus entericus. Now let us look. I have given you a brief idea about different enzymes that are getting secreted in different organs. Now let us look into the process that the entire process of digestion from the mouth. We chew our food. Yeah. We chew our food before swallowing it. This chewing breaks the food down into smaller pieces and mixes it with saliva produced by the salivary glands. Now, saliva contains two kinds of enzyme substances. The enzyme amylase starts the digestion of the starch. This enzyme helps in the breakdown of the starch first to dextrins, shorter polysaccharide, and then to disaccharide maltose. The mucus of saliva moistens and lubricates the food and makes it easier to swallow. Now let us look into digestion of carbohydrates in the alimentary canal. About 30% of the food starch is hydrolyzed in the mouth. Digestive system of salivary in the swallowed bolus enters the stomach because this enzyme is inactivated at the lower pH of the gastric juice. The gastric juice contains no carbohydrate digesting enzyme. Carbohydrases of pancreatic and intestinal juice, it digests carbohydrates in the small intestine. Pancreatic juice contains starch digesting enzyme called pancreatic amylase. Starch is hydrolyzed by it to maltose, isomaltose, and limit dextrins. Enzymes isomaltase and maltase of intestinal juice further hydrolyze maltose, isomaltose, and limit dextrins into glucose. Besides maltase, which hydrolyzes maltose, intestinal juice contains at least two other enzymes, that is the sucrase hydrolyzes sugar, sucrose into glucose and fructose, and lactase breaks down lactose into glucose and galactose. Okay. Now, digestion of proteins in the alimentary canal. Hydrogen proteins into smaller molecules of peptones. Digestion of the principal milk protein is initiated in the stomach with its coagulation. Renin hydrolyzes soluble casein into paracasein and whey protein. Paracasein is then precipitated spontaneously calcium paracaseinate to form the solid curd. Coagulation of casein promotes its further digestion. As the food passes to the duodenum, pepsin action is stopped by the alkalinity of the intestinal content. Most protein digestion occurs in the small intestine. Pancreatic juice enzymes trypsin, chymotrypsin, and elastase cleave peptide bonds with the interior of the polypeptide chains. These enzymes are thus grouped together as enteropeptidases, enzymes that remove amino acids from the ends of the polypeptide chain. In contrast, are exopeptidases. These include pancreatic juice enzyme carboxypeptidase, which removes amino group from carboxyl terminal end of the polypeptide chain, and aminopeptidase, which cleaves amino acids from the amino terminal end of the polypeptide chain. As a result of the action of these enzymes, polypeptide chains are digested into free amino acids, dipeptides, and tripeptides. Now, fat is largely digested in the small intestine. Pancreatic juice contains pancreatic lipase, that is the principal enzyme for the digestion of fat. Now, bile salts are of prime importance in the digestion of fat. Bile salts are steroids secreted by the liver in the bile. In the intestinal lumen, they reduce the surface tension of fat droplets, causing their breakdown into many ones. A fine emulsion of fat is thereby formed in the aqueous intestinal contents, and this increases the lipase action on the fats. Pancreatic lipase hydrolyzes triglyceride fats first into diglycerides and then into monoglycerides, releasing a fatty acid at each step. About two-thirds of the food fat is usually digested to monoglycerides in this way. Some of the food fat is digested only up to diglycerides, while small amounts are absorbed as triglycerides into intestinal cells. Intestinal lipase hydrolyzes diglycerides and triglycerides into fatty acids and monoglycerides. Fatty acids, monoglycerides, and glycerol are the major end products of fat digestion. Now, if you look at it, for carbohydrates, glucose is the end product of digestion. All proteins, it is digested into the respective amino acids, and for lipids, it is going to be monoglycerides, fatty acids, and glycerol. So, these are the end products of digestion. Now, let us look into hormonal control of digestion. So, you have now seen how enzymes control the digestion. Now, let us look at the hormonal control of the digestion. Are the enzymes that are very important. Now let us look at the activities of gastrointestinal tract are coordinated by nervous and endocrine systems of the body. At least four hormones are there, namely gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin, and gastric inhibitory peptides or GIP. And you also have ghrelin and motilin. Now helps to regulate the digestive system. All of these hormones are polypeptides secreted by endocrine cells in the mucosa of certain regions of the digestive tract. Now, if you look at gastrin, it is secreted from near the junction of the stomach and duodenum in response to the presence of food in the stomach. It stimulates secretion of gastric juice and movements of the stomach. Secretin is secreted from the duodenal mucosa, that is from the duodenum in response to the presence of HCl in it. It stimulates the secretion of water and bicarbonates in the pancreatic juice and bile and inhibits the secretion and movements of the stomach. Cholecystokinin, it is secreted from the duodenal mucosa in response to the presence of food in it. It stimulates the contraction of gallbladder and release of bile juice. Gastric inhibitory peptide is secreted from the duodenal mucosa in response to the presence of monosaccharides and fats. It inhibits gastric secretion and motility. Now, if you look at ghrelin, it appears to be a strong stimulant for appetite and feeding, also a potent stimulator of growth hormone secretion. Its stimuli for secretion is not clear, but secretion peaks prior to feeding and diminishes with gastric filling. So, if you look at all the drugs that are made to reduce the fat, they primarily see that they give more of ghrelin, so that when ghrelin is there, it is going to uh, block your hunger, as a result of which you will always have the feeling of being full and you don't feel like taking more of the food. So these are about the hormonal secretions. Now let us look into absorption and assimilation of digested foods. Absorption is the process by which nutrient molecules are taken into the cells of living organisms. Digested food is absorbed into the blood and lymph from the alimentary canal. Most absorption of food occurs in the small intestine. Absorption of nutrients is the primary job of intestinal villi. To reach the blood, a nutrient molecule must pass through an epithelial cell of the intestinal lining. Absorption occurs by the combination of simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and active transport. Now, simple diffusion requires the nutrients to be at higher concentration in the intestinal lumen than inside the cell. Its molecule should also be small and water soluble. This kind of absorption does not need energy and it's a very slow process. Water and water soluble substance like alcohol are absorbed by osmosis into the intestinal cells and thence to the blood. Water is absorbed partly in small intestine and mostly in the large intestine. Hydrophilic lipid insoluble sugars such as fructose are carried down their concentration gradient by facilitated diffusion, which is facilitated by specific transporter proteins present in the absorptive cell membrane. This process is powered by coupling sugar transport to the electrochemical gradient for sodium ions across the brush border. In active transport, entry of nutrients like amino acids occur via co-transport channels which couple the movement of sodium ions down a steep electrochemical gradient. The energy required for active transport is derived from hydrolysis of ATP by the carrier proteins acting as ATPase. From the capillaries, the nutrients enter the circulation and thus the simple forms of food pass to different cells and tissues of the body. The products of fat, such as fat soluble but water insoluble monoglycerides, fatty acids, and glycerol, are first incorporated into water soluble droplets called the micelles. From these micelles, fatty acids, glycerol, sterols, and fat soluble vitamins are absorbed by facilitated diffusion through the brush border membrane and are reconstructed within the absorptive cells into triglycerides. The remnants of the micelles is left behind and combines with new fatty acids and monoglycerols. The intestinal absorptive cells then collect the reconstructed triglycerides, combine them with phospholipids and cholesterol, and release into lymph in the form of protein coated water soluble fat globules or droplets called chylomicrons. Now, the next process is egestion. The process of defecation or removal of feces through the anus is called egestion. Fecus contains about 3/4 water and 1/4 solid matter, consisting about 30% dead bacteria, 10 to 20% fat, 2 to 3% protein, and 30% undigested roughage and dry constituents of the digestive juices. So this is about the thing. But and the last part will be what are some of the digestive disorders you see. So you already it's a very simple thing. It's not much you have here, though the list is very big. For your from your exam per se, if you know about these digestive disorders, it is more than sufficient. So let us look into that. First one is the jaundice. If the liver is affected, skin and eyes turn yellow due to the deposits of bile pigments. Next is vomiting. It is the ejection of the stomach contents through the mouth. This reflex action is controlled by the vomit center in the medulla. A feeling of nausea precedes vomiting. Diarrhea, abnormal frequency of bowel movements, and increased liquidity of the fecal discharge is known as diarrhea. It reduces the absorption of food. Constipation, feces are retained within the rectum as the bowel movements occur irregularly. So this can happen when your food does not, when you don't drink enough of water or your food lacks fiber. So at that point of time, you need to take laxatives if it is needed, or sometimes even isabgol or flax seeds which are rich in fiber will help you in defecation. Indigestion, in this condition the food is not properly digested, leading to a feeling of fullness. The cause of digestion are inadequate enzyme secretion, anxiety, food poisoning, overeating, and sometimes even very spicy food can result in indigestion. So with this, we complete the important points that needs to be covered from the point of need per se. Now let us look into the tests. So regarding transverse section of gut, identify the structures marked as A, D, E, and F. So this is going to be serosa, submucosa, mucosa, and lumen. So it is A. Regarding transverse section of gut, identify the structures marked as B, C in order in the picture and they constitute G. Identify G. So now you have to identify what is B and what is C. Inner circular layer, outer longitudinal layer, and muscularis propria. Now third question. Identify the teeth marked as A, B, C, D in their count in adult human, and also the marked structure as E in order in the picture. So now let us look at it. Incisor is 2, canine is 1, premolars 2, molars 3, and it is the socket of the jaw. So I said ICPM, incisors 2, canine 1, premolar 3, 2123, sorry, ICPM. Premolars it is going to be 2, molar it is going to be 3. It is the socket of the jaw. So incisor 2, canine 1, premolar 2, molars 3, socket of the jaw. The hard chewing surface of the teeth helps in mastication of food, is made up of enamel, none of the above, both of the above. It is both of the above. Sorry, fifth one. The inflammation of the intestinal tract is the common ailment due to bacterial or viral infections. Infections sites of the intestine like tapeworm, roundworm, threadworm, hookworm, pinworm, etc. Now here both are correct. Both the statements are correct. Regarding indigestion, choose the correct statement. Causes indigestion includes overeating, spicy food anxiety, feeling of fullness, food is not properly digested. So all the three are correct. It is as choose the incorrect statement. So none of the above is incorrect. Choose the appropriate statement regarding stomach. Stomach has a cardiac and a pyloric portion. The first part of the intestine, a fundic region and a pyloric portion, a cardiac portion into which esophagus opens, a fundic region and a pyloric portion which opens into the first part of the small intestine. So this is completely giving you the description about the stomach. So that is the correct answer. All are parts of small intestine except long jejunum, U-shaped duodenum. So it is none of the above because all are the parts of the small intestine. The question asks you have to identify the part which is not a part of small intestine. Here none of the above. Sorry. Dash regulates the opening of the esophagus into the stomach. The opening of the stomach into a duodenum is guarded by gastroesophageal sphincter and the pyloric sphincter. The lining the villi in the small intestine produce numerous microscopic projections called microvilli, giving a brush border appearance. These modifications increase the surface area enormously for absorption regarding 1 and 2. Now both the statements are correct, so it is C. Both are correct, so it is C. Villi are supplied with a network of capillaries and a large lymph vessel called the lacteal. Mucosal epithelium has goblet cells which secrete mucus that help in lubrication. Mucosa forms crypts in between the bases of villi in the intestine called crypts of Lieberkühn. So both are correct here. The accessory digestive glands include the lungs, liver, maybe with gallbladder and pancreas. Okay, regarding liver, choose the correct statement. It has three lobes. It's the largest gland of the body, situated in the abdominal cavity, weighs about. It is the largest gland of the body. That is the correct statement. Saliva secreted into the oral cavity contains enzymes, salivary amylase, and lysozymes. So let us look into 13th question. So it is salivary glands, the liver with gallbladder and the pancreas. So I'm going to end the test. I don't know why these red things have not gone. Maybe issues with my internet. Oh, so here some of the answers have not been taken. See the 15th thing, it in green. If it is red here, forgot to save and do the next. So it has given me the yellow legend. So if I had let me look into the question. Now, if I click it, I will get to know saliva secreted into the oral cavity contains. See, the correct answer is this. I have the correct answer, but I did not save it. So that was the mistake I did. So with this, if you really take this package, it's going to really help you to practice a lot from NCERT, which is the Bible for you for your PDF very quickly. Now, our tests here. Now with this we come to the end of today's class. Note that the NEET packages here, they have got 38 full tests, that is 3-hour full test with 15 original tests. That means these are created by the teachers looking into the complexity and also the chapters that feature very based upon the weightage of each chapter in the NEET, and 20 plus NEET papers all solved with solutions. You can ask additional help by using our Ask feature on our site, and we support chat group using Telegram. You can also book slots for one-to-one teaching with any tutor for any subject or for any lesson. For any inquiries, you can mail your query to info@play6.com.